The quiet colony Nova 6 was a small, peaceful colony located on the outer edge of the galaxy. It wasn't a large world, but it had everything the settlers needed to live a simple, quiet life. The humans who lived there were farmers, builders, and families far from the dangers of war. It was a place where people grew crops, built homes, and raised their children in peace. Life was slow and steady, a welcome change from the busy cities of Earth. There were no big city lights, no busy markets, just the endless sky and the quiet beauty of nature. Captain Mara stood on the balcony of the colony's main building, looking out over the wide plains below. The sun was setting, casting a warm glow over the land. Her eyes scanned the horizon, and for a moment, everything seemed perfect. But something felt wrong. There was an unease in the air, a feeling she couldn't shake. She had been in the military long enough to trust her instincts, and they were telling her that something was coming, something bad. She turned her attention to the sky. There was no sign of any ships, no strange signals on the scanners, but her gut told her otherwise. She ordered her officers to check the equipment again, just in case. The colony was well prepared for the basics. They had a small security force, a few patrol drones, and some defense systems set up around the perimeter, but nothing heavy, nothing that could handle an actual threat. After all, Nova 6 was just a small colony. Who would want to attack a place like this? As the evening wore on, Mara couldn't shake the feeling of growing danger. She took a deep breath and decided to check in with her officers. In the command center, Lieutenant Joe stood next to the main console staring at the screen. He didn't look up as she entered. "Anything new, Joe?" Mara asked, trying to sound calm. Lieutenant Joe finally turned to her, his face pale. "Captain, you should see this." He pointed to the screen where several small dots blinked in the far distance. "Ships. They weren't supposed to be there." "What is that?" Mara asked, frowning. "They're not registered," Joe said. "Unknown ships, too far to be civilian, and they're moving fast." Mara's heart skipped a beat. "How long before they reach us?" "Maybe 20 minutes, Joe said, his voice tight with worry. "At least if they keep up this speed." The room was quiet for a long moment. Mara's mind raced. What were these ships doing so far out in space? Who were they? And why were they coming here? She had no answers. But one thing was clear. Nova 6 wasn't ready for whatever was coming. Mara quickly issued orders to the colony's defense force to prepare for a possible attack. Her mind raced. She thought of her family back in the settlement, her sister, her nephews, and wondered if they were safe. But there was no time for worry now. She had a job to do. As the minutes passed, the ships got closer. The sky began to darken, and the peaceful atmosphere of Nova 6 began to shift. The colony's citizens had no idea what was coming. They continued to go about their business, unaware of the looming threat in the sky. The children played in the fields, and the farmers tended to their crops. No one looked up. But Mara did. She stood at the command center, eyes glued to the screen, watching the dots grow larger. Her thoughts raced. Should she send a distress signal to Earth? Could they help in time? The colony had no major military presence. Earth was hundreds of light years away. Who knew if help could reach them before it was too late? Her hands trembled slightly as she typed in the emergency codes. She sent the message out, hoping for the best but fearing the worst. It was her only option. Then, without warning, the sky above Nova 6 lit up. The first attack came suddenly, without any sign of warning. The ships in the sky opened fire, their weapons cutting through the peaceful landscape of Nova 6. The explosions rang out, loud and terrifying. Mara's heart raced. "No, no," she whispered. The attack had begun. There was nothing she could do to stop it. The colony's small defense systems activated, but it was clear they were no match for whatever had come. The explosions sent shockwaves through the colony, knocking buildings off their foundations. The air was thick with dust and smoke as fires broke out across the settlement. People screamed as they ran for cover. Mara's mind was a blur. She could hear the chaos outside, the distant cries of people, the sound of gunfire. Her team scrambled to launch the few defense drones they had, but it was clear this was not a fight they could win. The distress signal was still out there. But would anyone hear it in time? And if they did, would they arrive before Nova 6 was destroyed? The screen in front of Mara flickered. The incoming ships had stopped firing for now, but the silence was deafening. It was as if the calm before the storm had settled in. "Are we going to die?" asked a young voice. Mara turned. It was a little girl, no older than 6, standing in the doorway of the command center. Her big eyes were filled with fear. Mara knelt down in front of her. "No," she said softly, forcing a smile. "We're not going to die. We're going to fight, and we're going to win." But inside, Mara wasn't so sure. She knew the real fight was just beginning, and it would take everything they had to survive. As the distress signal from Nova 6 shot across the galaxy, it reached the ears of Earth Command. In a hidden command center far from the conflict, Admiral Reyes sat, watching the live feed from the colony. The image flickered as explosions tore through the small settlement, but there was no mistaking the grim reality of the situation. Nova 6 was under attack. Reyes had been in the military for years, but this was unlike anything he had seen before. The footage showed terrified civilians running through the streets, trying to escape the destruction. His eyes narrowed as he studied the alien ships hovering in the sky, casting long shadows over the settlement. There was no doubt in his mind. These weren't random invaders. These ships had purpose, and they were here for something. For a moment, Reyes felt a cold, heavy weight in his chest. The thought of the colony falling, the innocent lives being lost, made his blood boil. But he quickly pushed the emotion aside. His duty came first. There was no time for hesitation. He had to act. He turned to his communications officer, a young woman named Lieutenant Ella. Her face was tight with worry as she worked quickly to process the distress signal. "Admiral," she said, her voice steady despite the chaos unfolding on the screen. "The colony has sent out a second message. They're asking for backup, but it doesn't look like they'll last much longer. We need to respond now." Reyes nodded grimly. He glanced at the map of the galaxy displayed on the wall. Behind them, his mind already calculating the distance. Earth was far away, but the fleet was closer. The Skyborne Protocol was a secret contingency plan, one that had been in place for years. It had never been activated before, and Reyes had hoped it never would be. But now, it was their only hope. He activated the command console in front of him. The sound of the transmission filled the room, and the team gathered around, silent but focused. "Skyborne Protocol, Code Crimson. All fleets are to assemble. No exceptions." "We're going in," Reyes ordered. The room erupted into a flurry of activity as the orders were relayed. Lieutenant Ella's hands moved across her console, sending out commands across the network. Reyes looked up, his gaze cold and determined. There was no turning back now. Across the galaxy, ships were already beginning to stir. Massive warships, each one a city of its own, began to wake from their long slumber in their docks. The largest of them, the Iron Fist, was one of the oldest ships in the fleet, but it was still a symbol of strength and power. It had seen more battles than most could count, and its weapons were unmatched. The Valkyrie, a sleek ship with a dark silver exterior, followed closely behind, its engines roaring to life. And then, the Black Nova, the fastest and most agile ship in the fleet, its lights flashing as it made its way toward the jump point. Each ship carried thousands of soldiers, engineers, and civilians, all prepared for a mission like no other. It wasn't just a rescue mission. It was an entire fleet moving in response to an attack on humanity itself. Each crew member, whether soldier or civilian, knew the risks. They were about to fight not just for Nova 6, but for the survival of every human colony in the galaxy. In the docks, the mood was tense. Crew members rushed around, finalizing preparations, Engineers made last-minute checks on their ship's systems. People in uniform gave each other nods of reassurance, but their eyes betrayed their fear. No one knew exactly what awaited them at Nova 6, but the knowledge that they were humanity's last line of defense gave them strength. They were fighting for their homes, their families, and their future. Admiral Reyes stood at the center of the command deck of the Iron Fist, watching as the final reports came in. The crew was ready. The ships were ready. It was time to move. All ships prepare for launch. Coordinates set for Nova 6, he ordered, his voice firm. The Iron Fist and its fleet dropped into hyperspace, the vast emptiness of space folding around them. It was a strange, quiet journey, one that felt like an eternity as the ships sped toward their destination. The crew was silent as they awaited their arrival, knowing what was at stake. Reyes stood at the front, his eyes focused on the stars. He couldn't help but think about the people on Nova 6. How many of them would be gone by the time they arrived? Would they be too late? His thoughts were interrupted by the sudden alarm. It was a signal from one of the smaller scouting ships ahead. The alien ships had shifted their position, as if anticipating their arrival. They weren't just attacking the colony anymore. They were preparing for something bigger. Reyes clenched his fists. This wasn't going to be easy. The fleet was ready, but it was up against something far more dangerous than they had anticipated. Prepare for combat, Reyes ordered. We'll face them head-on, no retreat, not this time. As the fleet moved closer to Nova 6, the situation on the colony grew worse. The attacks had intensified, and there was little left of the once beautiful settlement. The people had taken shelter in underground bunkers, but the aliens showed no mercy. They had no intention of leaving until they had what they came for. But now they were about to face a force they had never expected. A force that would not back down, no matter the odds. The fleet was coming. And it would bring a message the galaxy would never forget. The fleet was now mere hours away from Nova 6, and the vastness of space seemed to stretch on forever. On the bridge of the Iron Fist, Admiral Reyes stood with his hands clasped behind his back, staring out into the inky blackness of space. His mind was sharp, calculating every possibility. The fleet he commanded was immense, one of the largest humanity had ever assembled. It wasn't just the warships. There were supply ships, medical vessels, and cargo carriers, all ready for what was to come. The Iron Fist, a towering vessel covered in layers of defensive plating, was the flagship of the fleet. It had been through countless conflicts, its hull scarred by battles fought in the past, but it was still the pride of the Earth fleet. Behind it, the Valkyrie, sleek and fast, moved like a shadow through space. Alongside them were the Black, Nova, Titan's Wrath, and dozens of other ships, each one a symbol of humanity's resilience. Reyes paced the command deck, his boots making a steady rhythm on the floor. Every now and then he would glance at the star map displayed in front of him. They were getting closer to Nova 6, and the images from the colony were more urgent with each passing minute. The distress signal had been sent, but it was clear that the situation on the ground was worsening. The colony, once peaceful and quiet, had been reduced to a place of chaos, and every minute they delayed was another minute the settlers had to endure the unknown forces invading their home. "Admiral," came the voice of Lieutenant Ella, breaking through his thoughts. She stood at her console, her eyes fixed on the screen. "We've received updated intel. The enemy fleet has changed positions. They're consolidating around Nova 6. It looks like they're preparing for something large." Reyes's expression hardened. "What exactly are they preparing for?" "We don't know yet," Ella replied, her fingers flying across her console. "But we're picking up strange energy signatures. It doesn't match anything we've seen before. They could be trying to build a weapon." Reyes clenched his jaw. The enemy, whoever they were, had clearly underestimated humanity's resolve. They'll regret that decision. He turned to his second-in-command, Commander Jack Donovan, a man whose calm demeanor belied the urgency of the situation. "Prepare all ships for immediate deployment. We may need to intercept before they finish whatever they're planning. I won't wait until we're on top of them." "Aye, sir," Donovan replied, his voice steady as always. He moved quickly to relay the orders to the fleet, and soon the entire armada was humming with activity, every crew member on high alert. As the hours ticked by, the anticipation grew unbearable. Crew members moved quickly but quietly, preparing their ships and their weapons, making final adjustments. The atmosphere was thick with a sense of determination and focus. No one spoke much, but their resolve was clear. They were here to defend humanity no matter the cost. Inside the Iron Fist, Reyes continued to oversee preparations. He watched as the star system they were approaching came into view, a swirl of planets and moons, with Nova 6 being the smallest among them. It was an isolated colony, but it was part of humanity's growing presence in the galaxy, and that made it valuable. No one could afford to let it fall. "We're entering the system now," Lieutenant Ella called out. "The enemy is in range." Reyes stepped forward, his heart pounding in his chest. This was it. They had made it. The ships had arrived, but they didn't yet know what to expect. The sight of Nova 6, burning and crumbling beneath the shadow of the alien fleet, sent a sharp pain through his chest. He couldn't help but think of the families who lived there, the children, the workers, the scientists. They had no idea what was about to happen. "Initiate the first phase of attack," Reyes commanded, his voice steady but carrying the weight of the moment. "We're going in hard, no hesitation." The first wave of ships, the Valkyrie and Titan's Wrath, broke off from the fleet, their engines glowing brightly as they closed in on Nova 6. The sound of their engines filling the quiet of space was like a battle cry, a message to the enemy that humanity would not back down. Reyes watched the live feed, his eyes narrowing. The enemy ships were now clearly visible, their dark, jagged forms floating around Nova 6 like vultures circling a dying carcass. They were large, but not as large as the human warships. Still, their sheer numbers were intimidating. "We're picking up a transmission," Ella said, looking up from her console. "It's from the enemy ships." "Put it through," Reyes ordered, his voice calm, though he felt a knot in his stomach. The screen flickered, and a strange face appeared. It was alien, with a hard angular shape and glowing eyes that seemed to pierce through the screen. The voice that came through was cold and mechanical with a strange undertone. "Humans," the voice said. "You are too late. This colony is ours. Leave now, or you will face the consequences." Reyes leaned forward, his eyes never leaving the screen. "We're not here to negotiate," he said, his voice filled with a quiet fury. "We're here to protect our people, and you'll leave Nova 6 or face the full power of humanity's fleet." The alien's face twisted into something resembling a smile, though it was more unsettling than anything else. "Then you will learn the true meaning of power." The transmission cut off, leaving the bridge in an eerie silence. Reyes turned to his crew. "Prepare for the next phase. All ships advance. Let's show them what it means to challenge humanity." And with that, the fleet surged forward, moving with a purpose. The battle for Nova 6 had only just begun, but humanity's response was clear. They were not here to lose. They were here to win. The fleet moved into position around Nova 6, the stars in the distance now blending into the dark void of space. The tension aboard the Iron Fist was palpable, each crew member focused on their tasks, awaiting their orders. The hum of the ship's systems was the only sound that filled the otherwise silent command deck. It was an eerie calm before the storm, but the air was thick with anticipation. Admiral Reyes stood at the front, watching the holographic projections of the enemy ships and the colony. His mind worked over the strategies, calculating every angle, trying to predict what the aliens would do next. They were unlike any enemy he had faced before, and the unknown factor made them even more dangerous. But Reyes had led humanity's fleet through tougher challenges before. They had always come out victorious, and he would not let that change now. "Admiral," Lieutenant Ella spoke up, her voice breaking through his thoughts. "The enemy is beginning to mobilize. It looks like they're preparing to engage." Reyes nodded. "Of course, they must know we're here now." The image on the holographic display zoomed in, showing the alien fleet shifting position. They were forming a tight formation around Nova 6, creating a wall of ships designed to protect their forces and keep any enemy at bay. The display also showed new energy readings, unusual patterns that had not been seen before. Reyes's instincts told him that the enemy was not just preparing for a fight, they were planning something far more dangerous. He turned to his second-in-command, Commander Donovan, who was watching the feed from the fleet's various ships. "What do you think they're planning?" Reyes asked. Donovan's eyes narrowed as he studied the data. "I'm not sure, but it's not normal. They've been arranging their ships into a defensive grid, but this could be a distraction. There's something they're hiding. We need to stay alert." Reyes glanced at the tactical display. The alien fleet was indeed forming a defensive position. It was clear they wanted to prevent the human ships from getting too close to Nova 6. However, there was something unsettling about the way they had positioned themselves. They were taking defensive measures, but there was also a certain precision to it, as if they were waiting for something. "Let's keep our distance for now," Reyes decided. "We need to see what they're up to before we make our move. The last thing we need is to walk right into a trap." He turned to Lieutenant Ella. "Send out a scouting ship. We need to get a better look at their formation." Ella quickly relayed the orders, and soon one of the smaller ships from the fleet, the Shadow's Edge, took off. It was faster and more maneuverable than the larger warships and was perfect for reconnaissance. The Shadow's Edge moved silently toward the outer edge of the enemy formation, its sensors scanning every inch of the alien ships. For a moment, everything seemed quiet, the fleet floating in space like an ancient battleground. But as the Shadow's Edge neared the enemy fleet, something strange happened. A sudden flash of light erupted from the alien ships, followed by a cascade of energy readings that sent a ripple of alarm across the human fleet. "We've lost contact with the Shadow's Edge," Ella reported, her voice tight with concern. "Their communications have been jammed. It's too risky to send any more ships in." Reyes's eyes narrowed, the pieces falling into place. The enemy had known they would send scouts. This was no ordinary alien force. They were prepared for humanity's every move. "Stay focused," Reyes said, his voice calm but filled with authority. "The fleet holds position. We'll see what they do next. They won't expect us to move in slowly." The hours dragged on. The two fleets remained in a tense standoff, the silence of space pressing down on the human ships. On board the Iron Fist, the crew worked tirelessly, analyzing the enemy's every move. The alien ships were too far to engage directly, but the suspense was growing unbearable. Then, without warning, a large object emerged from the center of the alien formation. It was massive, unlike anything the humans had ever seen. It seemed to pulse with a strange energy, and its shape was unlike any ship, angular and shifting, like a creature made of shadows. The entire fleet fell silent as they watched it move, forward, slowly but steadily. The alien ships parted to allow it to pass, and for the first time since the fleet arrived, a deep sense of unease settled in the pit of Reyes's stomach. "What is that?" Donovan asked, his voice tinged with disbelief. "I don't know," Reyes replied, his mind racing. "But whatever it is, it's important. They wouldn't move it to the front if it wasn't." The object floated toward Nova 6, and the energy, readings from it began to spike. Reyes knew then that the enemy was preparing something far more powerful than any of them had anticipated. This was no longer just a fight for survival. It was a fight to protect everything humanity had built. In the galaxy, Reyes turned to his crew. "All ships prepare for anything. I don't know what that thing is, but it's not good news. Keep your weapons charged and stay sharp." The atmosphere on the Iron Fist shifted. Crew members moved quickly, checking their weapons and systems, preparing for the worst. No one spoke much. There was a feeling in the air, a knowing that the situation was about to escalate beyond anything they had prepared for. As the alien craft continued to move toward the colony, a signal crackled through the communication channels. It was a message, not from the alien fleet but from the surface of Nova 6 itself. The signal was faint and distorted, but it was clear enough to understand. We can still fight. We won't give up. Humanity will fight back." The words echoed in the silence of the command deck. They were from one of the colony's survivors. The message was a beacon of hope, a reminder of why the fleet was there. They weren't just fighting to protect a colony. They were fighting for the very spirit of humanity. Reyes felt a surge of determination. They couldn't let the aliens win. Not now, not ever. Full speed ahead, he commanded. We're not waiting anymore. All ships move in. It's time to end this. The human fleet surged forward, engines roaring to life as they pushed toward the alien formation. The battle was no longer just about Nova 6. It was a battle for the future of humanity itself. And Reyes knew deep down that the outcome of this fight would echo through the galaxy for generations to come. The fleet moved swiftly now, closing the gap between themselves and the alien formation. The air aboard the Iron Fist was thick with tension, every crew member knowing that the time for hesitation had passed. Admiral Reyes stood at the command deck, his eyes locked on the approaching enemy. The fleet was ready, but the mystery surrounding the alien force continued to grow. The object they had deployed, its strange shifting shape and the eerie energy readings it emitted, seemed to grow larger with every passing moment. "We're closing in," Lieutenant Ella reported, her voice steady but filled with urgency. "The alien formation is holding their position. It looks like they're waiting for us to make the first move." Reyes nodded, his gaze never leaving the screen. The alien fleet, still formidable and ominous, had not made any aggressive maneuvers, but there was no doubt in his mind that they were preparing for something. The unknown craft at the center of their formation was becoming more and more of a concern. They had no idea what it was capable of, and every moment they spent guessing was a moment the enemy could use to their advantage. "Get a full scan of that object," Reyes ordered. "We need to know exactly what we're dealing with." Ella's fingers flew across the console as the ship's systems engaged, sending waves of sensors toward the alien craft. The data that came back was unlike anything they had encountered before. Energy signatures that shifted in unpredictable patterns, its material composition not matching anything in their databases. The object wasn't just a ship. It was something more, something far beyond their understanding. "We're not getting a clear picture," Ella said, her brow furrowing. "It's like the ship is distorting the signals. We can't get a solid read on it." Reyes clenched his jaw. He had hoped to learn something more useful, but the data only deepened the mystery. It was clear that this was not an ordinary alien vessel. It was part of something bigger, something more dangerous. "Have we received any word from Nova 6? He asked, his voice sharp with frustration. Ella checked the communications console, and after a brief pause she replied, "No new transmissions. The last message we received was from a survivor, but it's been a while since then. We may have lost contact with the colony." Reyes felt a knot tighten in his chest. Time was running out. The alien fleet had already surrounded the colony. Every minute that passed without intervention meant more risk for those trapped on the surface. "Commander Donovan," Reyes said, turning toward his second-in-command, "prepare the Valkyrie and Titan's Wrath. We'll send them in for a direct approach, and I want those energy readings mapped in real time. We can't just sit here while the situation deteriorates." "Understood, Admiral," Donovan responded. He turned quickly to relay the orders, and the crew went to work, setting up the necessary systems for the next phase of their plan. Reyes returned his focus to the alien fleet. The object at the center of their formation was still moving toward Nova 6. It was as though it had a purpose, a destination it was determined to reach. He couldn't afford to wait any longer. The more time they gave the aliens, the more likely it was they would deploy whatever weapon or device they had hidden within that strange craft. "Full speed ahead," Reyes ordered, his voice unwavering. "We need to break through their formation and get to the colony. They won't have the time to react if we move fast enough." The human fleet surged forward, its warships moving with purpose and precision. The Iron Fist led the charge, followed closely by the Valkyrie and Titan's Wrath. Behind them, the remaining ships formed a protective formation, ready to respond to any threat that arose. As they neared the alien formation, the tension reached its peak. The vastness of space seemed to stretch endlessly around them, but in that moment, all eyes were fixed on the enemy fleet. The alien ships, though silent, seemed to pulse with an eerie, otherworldly energy. Reyes could feel the weight of the situation pressing down on him. This was no longer just a battle for Nova 6. This was about defending humanity's place in the galaxy. proving that no force, no matter how advanced, could stand against them. Then, just as they were about to enter the alien perimeter, the unexpected happened. The strange object at the center of the alien fleet began to glow brightly, sending out pulses of energy in every direction. For a moment, it was as if the universe itself had stopped. The energy was unlike anything they had seen, a force that rippled through space, causing the very fabric of reality to tremble. "Admiral," Ella cried out, her voice full of alarm. "The energy readings are off the charts. We can't predict what will happen next." Reyes's mind raced. This was it, the moment he had been preparing for. The alien fleet had activated something, and they were about to reveal their true intentions. Whatever this was, it was far more than a simple weapon. It was a message. The Iron Fist shuddered as it moved closer to the energy source. The alien fleet remained in place, their ships silent and motionless, as though they were watching, waiting for something. "Brace for impact," Reyes ordered. "All ships, hold your formation and be ready for anything." In that moment, the energy pulse from the alien object intensified, rippling outward in a vast wave that spread across space like a shockwave. The fleet felt the shock through their ships, a sudden and violent pressure that seemed to tear at the edges of reality itself. The human ships were rocked, their systems flickering as the pulse passed over them. "Captain," Donovan said, his voice tight with urgency. "Our shields are holding, but for how long?" Reyes's mind raced as he assessed the situation. This was more than a simple defensive move. The alien fleet wasn't just trying to defend Nova 6. They were trying to send a message. They wanted humanity to know they were no ordinary foe. "Return fire," Reyes ordered, his voice firm. "We'll make it clear to them that we're not backing down. This is our fight, and we're not going to let them win." The Iron Fist's weapon systems powered up, and the first wave of energy blasts fired toward the alien ships. The battle for Nova 6 had begun in earnest, and the fate of humanity was now in the balance. The energy pulse from the alien object rippled outward, the shockwave pressing against the human fleet like an invisible hand. The Iron Fist shuddered once more as its shields absorbed the force, the ship's systems flickering as the power fluctuated. Reyes could feel the strain on his body as the pressure built, but he remained rooted, his eyes locked on the view ahead. This was no time for weakness. The survival of humanity, their colonies, and everything they had built was hanging in the balance. "Status report," Reyes called, his voice steady, despite the chaos unfolding around him. "Shields holding, but at 65% capacity," Lieutenant Ella replied, her voice cool under pressure. "Energy levels are fluctuating. We're not sure how long the shields will last under this kind of stress." Reyes nodded. "We need to break through. Commander Donovan, initiate evasive maneuvers. We can't stay in this energy wave for too long." Donovan was already at his station, his fingers working rapidly over the controls. "Aye, Admiral," he responded. The Iron Fist began to shift course, dodging incoming bursts of strange energy that came from the alien object. The other ships in the fleet followed suit, moving in coordinated formations to avoid the worst of the shockwaves. As the Iron Fist maneuvered, Reyes caught sight of something new, something he hadn't expected. The alien fleet had begun to respond. Their ships moved with precision, their energy readings spiking as they engaged their weapon systems. But this wasn't the same kind of attack humanity had seen in past conflicts. These weren't traditional weapons. They were something else entirely. Beams of concentrated energy that seemed to distort the fabric of space around them, as though they could bend reality itself. "Admiral, incoming fire!" Ella shouted, her hands flying over the console. "They're targeting our lead ships. The Valkyrie and Titan's Wrath are in the direct line of fire." Reyes gritted his teeth. He had expected the enemy to strike back, but this was unlike anything he had ever faced. The alien fire was unlike human weapons, almost unpredictable. The beams seemed to warp and twist, bending around obstacles as if they could sense the ship's movements. "Divert all power to shields," Reyes ordered. "We'll hold them off as long as we can. I want every ship in this fleet to stay coordinated. If they try to flank us, we'll close ranks and force them into submission." The tension on the bridge mounted. The Valkyrie and Titan's Wrath were expertly evading the alien fire, but the enemy fleet was vast, and they were now learning the patterns of the human ships. The battle was becoming more than just a fight for Nova 6. It was becoming a contest of will. Would humanity's ingenuity and determination be enough to outsmart the advanced alien forces? Only time would tell. Suddenly, the strange object at the heart of the alien formation pulsed again. This time, it wasn't just a burst of energy. It was a wave, a massive expansion that seemed to send ripples across the entire battlefield. The energy spread outward, disrupting the communications channels and scrambling the fleet's navigation systems. "Admiral," Donovan shouted, his voice full of alarm. "The systems are failing. We've lost communication with the Shadow's edge. We can't track the rest of the fleet's movements." Reyes clenched his fists. This wasn't just an attack on their ships. It was an attempt to destabilize the entire fleet. If the enemy could continue to disrupt their systems, they would have the upper hand. "Stay focused," Reyes barked. "We can't let them break us. Our fleet is our strength. We will adapt. Lieutenant, send a burst transmission to all ships. They need to adjust their tactics immediately. This is not just about firepower, it's about strategy. We'll use the alien confusion to our advantage." Ella quickly complied, sending the message to every ship in the fleet. As soon as the transmission was out, Reyes gave the order to change tactics. "All ships, shift to defensive formations. We will regroup and use our mobility to outmaneuver them. Make every shot count." The fleet adjusted quickly, the ships moving in tandem to form a shifting serpentine pattern. They could no longer rely solely on brute force. They needed to be more nimble, more strategic. The alien forces had the upper hand in terms of technology, but humanity had something they didn't: adaptability. As the alien fleet fired again, the human ships dodged and weaved with impressive agility. The beams of energy cut through space, leaving streaks of bright light, but the humans remained elusive. They had created a small gap in the alien formation, and they seized the opportunity. "Admiral, we've found an opening," Ella said, her voice filled with excitement. "The alien ships are starting to scatter. We can make a push toward the heart of their formation." Reyes knew this was the moment they had been waiting for. The element of surprise was on their side. "Take the opening," he commanded. "All ships full speed ahead. We push through now or we'll lose the opportunity. We're not letting them get away with this." With the fleet now on the offensive, the human ships surged forward, closing the distance between themselves and the core of the alien formation. The alien ships were scrambling to realign, trying to regroup and respond, but the human fleet was fast, faster than they anticipated. They weren't just fighting for Nova 6 anymore. They were fighting for survival. They were showing the aliens that humanity would not yield to fear, would not be broken by an overwhelming force. Reyes watched as the gap between the human fleet and the alien ships narrowed. The Iron Fist led the charge, its massive hull slicing through space. The fleet followed closely, maintaining tight formations. Each ship fired its weapons in unison, creating a blinding barrage of energy. The alien ships were now struggling to keep up, their advanced technology unable to counter the sheer determination of the human fleet. The alien object at the center of their formation pulsed once more, but this time, the humans were ready. They had anticipated its movements and they had adapted. The human fleet was making their push, breaking through the alien defenses. "Admiral, we're getting close to the enemy flagship," Donovan reported. "It's in the heart of their formation. We can end this now." Reyes nodded, his face determined. "Keep moving forward. We're not stopping until we've broken their defenses. This battle will be remembered." As the fleet pressed on, their path cleared and they found themselves facing the alien flagship. It was massive, much larger than anything the humans had encountered before. But for the first time in the battle, Reyes felt a glimmer of hope. Humanity was fighting back with everything they had, and they were winning.